I'm Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/ I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. Good morning, and I hope you are enjoying the new podcasts that I created, which, again, if you haven't heard of them, one of them is called Shiro, Be Your Own Hero, and that one was about heroism and inspiring yourself to be your own hero in your life instead of trying to look for others to be your hero or mentors. And then the second one is called Think Out for Your Imagination, and that one is about the imagination I had when I was growing up and how I imagined that I could fold up my house into pocket size and take it with me wherever I wanted. And then the next one is Chats, Barks, and Growls, Combos with Your Pet. That one is probably the most fun one because I get to do my voice. And I get to do Truffle's voice. And just, tell you what I think dogs think throughout the day and what they think about their owners. So that one's fun for me. Fun. I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website, and I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description, and I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I am looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them, and spreading the word more about my podcast. All right, so quick update on the podcast and the NBLD project fundraiser. So I want to thank my first two contributors to the NBLD project fundraiser that I have going on for my birthday, which is coming up in a couple weeks. And the goal is $500. We have raised $250 so far, and I will also donate some of the ad money from the podcast to that. So that should go up to around $260 from that. And also wanting to thank again my first supporter that I have from the audience via Spotify for setting up a contribution to the podcast. I want to thank her, Kate Sutherland, because it took her some time and effort to set that up, and being able to have my first supporter is amazing. And sorry if I shouldn't have said your full name, but I wanted to acknowledge you personally, more personally this time. So thank you, Kate. And I hope that I will continue to have more supporters from the audience, not just from the fundraiser for the NBLD project. Oh, and I will include the link for the fundraiser in the podcast description if you feel so called to contribute to that. Okay, so today's episode is about the visual memory and how it applies to NLD. And I'm using articles about autism because those are usually easier to find than ones about NLD. Have you had challenges with your visual memory because of being neurodivergent? Have you had issues with remembering where you left an object like your car keys, journal, or toothbrush unless it's in the same spot you always put it? Have you had problems remembering how to drive to places that you haven't been to more than a few times? I have experienced all of those challenges with visual memory and still do. I don't remember well where I left or put down an item like my car keys unless it's in the same place it always is. In fact, it doesn't matter what that item is, I still have that issue. Once I start routinely doing something, though, it does get easier. For example, when I drive to a place more than 3 times, I can remember how to get there without directions because it's familiar. This is also true with other physical activities like sewing, running, and tasks at work. I'm comparing visual memory to kinesthetic memory activities that I do, like running, driving, knitting, cooking, and sewing, because those are easier for me to do. It's also easier because I can remember how to do them even if I take a break from doing that and come back. It comes back like riding a bike. For example, I stopped skiing and running during early COVID because I was going through a lot of personal things. I was healing from my first romantic breakup and the con artist. I also took a break from skiing because of the COVID outbreak. I stopped running because of torn cartilage in my knees from skiing. When I resumed them again, I questioned why I stopped because I missed them so much. Those activities came back more easily when I resumed them than driving did after my break from due to my car accidents. I stopped driving for about 6 months after my first 2 car accidents because I couldn't trust myself to drive safely. My confidence was so shaken that if I did drive, I would visualize getting into another accident. Yes, that wasn't a good thing to do, but it was hard not to do, especially when I had knocked myself out with the first accident. Since then, I have learned to be more cautious when driving so I don't have another accident. Yes, I had one last year, but luckily that was in the parking lot, not with a moving vehicle on the road or exiting the highway. Those were scarier and more severe in me remembering and in how they happened. I also took a break with knitting for a bit because I wasn't really into it and I was upset at not being able to redo a top I had knitted. I was trying to redo it because it wasn't the right size anymore. Instead of making it the right size, I made it too small the second time. I got so frustrated that I just threw it away. During the holidays last year, I learned how to sew some kitchen boas as Christmas presents. I've had fun making them once I got the process down. It was challenging though because I had to learn how to sew in a straight line. I had to learn how to iron the towels and fabric for the boas. I also had to learn how to be patient with myself and my mom while she was teaching me the process and steps. It was really rewarding once I was done though because I could say I made that when I gave a boa to my brother or to my friends. I might make more if I make time to do so. So the reason why I gave those examples was because they are they have visual aspects in them even if they're more kinesthetic. The visual aspects with running would be, at least for me, I try not to fall because I am training for the Triple Crown this year, my second time doing it. And excuse me, I am a crazy runner. I have done 6 half marathons, 1 full marathon, a 10K, and a 5K. I'm not saying that to brag, but I'm saying that to paint a picture of how much I like it and how much I enjoy doing it. It's one of the things that I find therapeutic. And when I'm running, I try not to fall. Same thing when I'm skiing because of the training that I'm doing this year for 3 half marathons. I've already did one. I'm going to be doing another one this Sunday, my second one, and then another one in August, I believe. The reason why I brought up those examples of knitting, sewing, and running and driving is because they all have visual challenges for me, even though they're also kinesthetic. So, also a visual challenge with driving, like I said about visualizing those memories from the car accidents. Another one is trying to multitask and trying to plan ahead on where to turn or where to follow directions for a place you're going to. And that is challenging for me to do sometimes. Sometimes it's really easy depending on where I'm going and if I've been to that place before. For knitting and sewing, it's challenging because I don't always have a critical eye for noticing my mistakes. I can notice other people's mistakes better for some reason than my own. And it's not because I'm biased, but that's just how my brain works. So having that challenge is true for me. I want to talk about some articles, though, with these topics and how they relate to autism and NLD. So the first article is titled, "What is Working Memory and How Does It Relate to Autism?" Quote, "An estimated 1 in 100 people worldwide have autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. That's more than 75 million people. These numbers are also consistent in children. In fact, in the US, they're even higher." What is working memory? Many people are familiar with the term short-term memory. It refers to the temporary storage and recall of information in our brains. Working memory covers a similar type of memory. It relates to holding on to information for a short period. The widely agreed upon difference between the two is that working memory refers to the ability to use the information you're storing. It involves not just recall, but application, hence the name working. The following daily activities, for example, are all require us to use working memory. Listening to and remembering a series of instructions, listening to someone tell us a story about their day, remembering what one said in a conversation, remembering an address while taking directions, mental mathematical calculations, and paraphrasing information or conversations. Working memory is one of the central executive functions of the brain. Without a good working memory, the world feels very different. But this is the reality for many people with autism. Why is this the case? Difficulty remembering and following a set of instructions. You may ask your child to do 3 things before going to bed. They only do 2, and the oversight wasn't deliberate. They simply couldn't retain all 3 tasks while carrying out the first 2, making small, avoidable mistakes in complex tasks. Similarly, even brilliant children may make mistakes, simple mistakes, when following instructions. From the outside, it appears they were lazy or not trying hard enough, but poor working memory is more likely to blame. Inefficient memory strategies. As children grow older, they may begin to recognize that they struggle with memory. Then they start to either deliberately or subconsciously develop memory strategies. However, these are often very inefficient. They can inhibit their ability to work well. For example, repeating instructions is a common memory strategy for autistic children. This takes up even more bandwidth in the brain, which gets in the way of doing the tasks as well. Difficulty prioritizing one task over another. Several studies have shown that working memory difficulties affect decision making and prioritizing. In one particular study, researchers gave children 2 tasks. The researchers told the children to concentrate on one while ignoring the other. Children in the study with ASD were not able to do so. Measured brain activity showed that they continued to focus on both tasks. They couldn't shift their attention in day-to-day life. This may present as difficulty switching from one task to another. It also manifests when they have to follow several instructions as previously explained. Frequent inattentiveness. Constantly struggling to process information is exhausting. Classrooms can come with overwhelming feelings of comparison and ability. These factors can make children inattentive. They are mentally taxing, and children may zone out to have a period of peace. Easily distracted due to working memory issues. This translates to becoming an easily distracted child. Difficulty maintaining attention combined with difficulty prioritizing means children jump between tasks. They were unable to maintain their concentration. Difficulty staying on task. This may present as difficulty staying on or finishing tasks in a classroom setting. Being easily distracted means they may jump between tasks in class or stop paying attention altogether. This isn't likely deliberate. Instead, it is a subconscious coping mechanism to manage the mental load they're under. Disorganized due to working memory issues. Difficulty retaining and applying information often makes people with autism appear disorganized. As well as mentally losing their place mid-task, they may lose their belongings. Something they put down 5 seconds ago seems to disappear as the brain doesn't retain where they put it. Difficulty waiting their turn in a group. Children with ASD may appear impatient in group settings. What's far more likely, though, is that they can't recall an agreed upon sequence of events. Difficulty with mental mathematics. As applying mentally held information is difficult, this affects mathematical abilities. Remembering a mathematical formula while trying to solve a problem can put too much strain on working memory. Reading and language difficulties. Reading and learning language relates to one's memory abilities. Remembering new words without any context or meaning requires using the working memory. Children with ASD do much better at learning languages if they are not required to retain too much information immediately but can write it down. Apps to help working memory and language. Goally, Goally, is an expert designed suite of therapy apps to help working memory in children with ASD. Our last feature, Word Lab, is for kids who struggle to remember their core words. How repetition and video modeling help children understand the meaning of words and how to form those words independently. Not to mention, we also have a completely customizable visual scheduler for working memory improvement. Help your child improve their working memory. Like all memory abilities, working memory is something a child can exercise and strengthen like a muscle. For children with ASD, their starting point is well behind their peers, but you can still help your child make progress. Here are some other ways besides Goally to help your child with their working memory. Use simple language when explaining tasks and instructions. Gesture and use visual aids when explaining tasks and instructions. Reduce distractions such as noise when explaining tasks to them. Teach them self-calming strategies for when they feel overwhelmed. Connect things they need to remember with other senses or emotions. Work on improving their visual memory through interactive games, and keep their life as structured as possible. Close quote. So that was the first article. And that article, I would say, also applies to NLD because it talks about the working memory, right? And we learned that the working memory has to do with carrying out tasks and remembering the order and remembering the instructions you were given. That is also challenging for people with NLD to do because it can be hard to prioritize, and it's more difficult for executive functioning and multitasking and remembering the instructions you were given while trying to carry out different tasks. So the second article is titled How the Memory Helps Us to Understand the Neurodiversity of Autism, from the 28th of July in 2021. Quote, episodic memory is better understood if we think of it as our autobiographical memory. It enables us to have a consistent sense of ourselves over time. And it kicks in not only when recalling past experiences, but also when planning for the future. When we make plans for the future, we reflect on what our past experiences have been and use these experiences to inform decision making. We are able to do this thanks to our episodic memory. Now, episodic memory is not a strength for autistic people, and for some people, it can make it difficult to recall what has been done on a previous day and to accurately attend to the passage of time. This is not the case for all autistic people, but many will have difficulties with planning, which are in part due to episodic memory difficulties. Somatic memory. Now, whilst autistic people may have difficulties with episodic memory, somatic memory is where they really come into their own. Many autistic people will have high IQs and powerful reasoning abilities due to the strength of their somatic memories. Somatic memory is our ability to record facts and figures about the world. People with strong somatic memories will be good at spotting patterns and figuring out how things work. This is why there are a disproportionately high portion of autistic people working in the fields such as mathematics, science, and technology, where remembering facts and figuring out how things work is important. Strong somatic memory can also aid in creating beautiful things such as music and art, which are reliant on an understanding of rhythm and patterns. Build on strengths and weaknesses. We all need to spend time working on our weaknesses to function successfully in this world. whilst also building upon our strengths, as these are the areas where we will be able to contribute to the world and experience personal satisfaction. Some studies have suggested that visual cues can help autistic people to access and build strengths in episodic memory. Looking at photos of past events, for example, might help to trigger personal memories and help to develop a sense of the self being consistent over time. Videos have also been shown to be powerful tools in both teaching new skills to autistic people and in recalling important past events, what happened, and how they felt about them. Close quote. Okay, I had to record this episode twice because it didn't record properly the first time. So sorry if I made some mistakes in the second time recording that I didn't make in the first time. Um, so my thoughts about the second article are that it does well with going over the episodic memory and the somatic memory and the challenges that people with ASD have in those areas and the strengths they have with the somatic memory. I would say that can also be applied to people with NLD because with episodic memory, I do have challenges in that area in terms of being able to remember what I did the previous day and how to apply that for the future. I would say that has to do with executive functioning and prioritizing and being able to recall on events and being able to apply that to the future and being able to keep track of what you did and what you're trying to do and where you're going with that. But with my somatic memory, I'm pretty good at remembering figures and facts. I am good at memorizing numbers, and I can memorize them quickly and I can retain them. And that helps me with balancing my budget because I'm able to remember different amounts for various things that I keep purchasing. And because that helps me, I know roughly where I am with my different categories I spend in. And I try to keep track of the frequent categories like personal and wants because I do have quite a bit that I spend in those categories because I have necessities that I need and I have the fun category with my friends and with dating and with my brother that I like to do to balance out the stresses of work and NLD and the migraines that I have. The reason I bring that up is because it not only applies to the somatic memory and the episodic memory, but it also applies to the part where they were talking about building on strengths and weaknesses. I do try to make my weaknesses into strengths by making it easier for me to do that task than it was the last time I did it. Yes, I might not be able to do it perfectly or the same as a neurotypical does to the same ability or without making so many mistakes. But I use those mistakes as learning points because then the next time I do that task, like balancing my budget or doing taxes or driving or going grocery shopping, whatever, I can learn from my mistakes and I can hopefully not make them again or not as often. And so I hope that you are able to apply these to yourself, whether you have autism, ADHD, NLD, dyslexia, or maybe you have more than one diagnosis for neurodivergent. I know for me, it feels like sometimes I have three: NLD, ADHD, and the migraines. I know the migraines aren't in the neurodivergent category, but for me, it feels like it's a challenge. It's not a disability, but it's a challenge. And sometimes I feel like I have ADHD because it's hard for me to focus on things. and pay attention. Unless I'm listening to music constantly, that helps me with work. And with NLD, that is a challenge that I know I have. But I've been working on the different challenges that I have so that they're not so challenging, really. So I hope you're able to apply these lessons to yourself, whether you're neurotypical, neurodivergent, or you know somebody who's neurodivergent. And I will talk to you next Friday. Bye. Good morning, and I hope you are enjoying the new podcasts that I created, which, again, if you haven't heard of them, one of them is called Shiro, Be Your Own Hero, and that one was about heroism and inspiring yourself to be your own hero in your life instead of trying to look for others to be your hero or mentors. And then the second one is called Think Out for Your Imagination, and that one is about the imagination I had when I was growing up and how I imagined that I could fold up my house into pocket size and take it with me wherever I wanted. And then the next one is Chats, Barks, and Growls, Combos with Your Pet. That one is probably the most fun one because I get to do my voice. And I get to do Truffle's voice. And just, you know, uh, tell you what I think dogs think throughout the day and what they think about their owners. So that one's fun for me. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than it originally was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.